Hey everybody, I'm Sam Menser with the Chattanooga Public Library. Today I'm going to continue my studio series. As you know, I manage the recording studio at the downtown location. With this, I'm going to kind of add what we've talked about and kind of put some things in context. So, just to recap, I've been basically doing some intro videos on various topics that have to do with production and recording in a studio, various pieces of hardware, processors, and techniques, mixing, things like that, mastering as well. But today, I'm going to start by choosing a record that I think is an exceptional example that highlights a lot of the things that we've talked about, and one that is available to either stream through the Hoopla service that you have access to with your library card, or some of the records you might be able to actually borrow a physical CD copy. Not this one today, but it is available to stream on Hoopla, and it is Dr. Dre's album 2001. This record, as you can see, this is the parental advisory copy, but there's also a censored version and an instrumental version. If you're not a huge fan of hip hop in general, it doesn't really matter because this record sounds so good that it transcends any genre boundaries that you might have preconceived notions about. So, some of the reasons why I chose this record are because it sounds excellent and it holds up today. It was released in 1999, but it had been in the process of being recorded over years, probably at least 5 years in the making. Um, Dr. Dre is the main featured artist, but he's also a exceptional producer, and a lot of people don't really know this, but he's an amazing engineer as well, and mixing engineer also. His real name is Andre Young, but for the sake of this video, we're going to go by his artist alias Dr. Dre. Now, like I said, this record was years in the making. Dr. Dre is known as a perfectionist, um, and he takes his time with with his projects. And I think he's only actually released 3 under his name over his long career, but he's definitely produced for other people and done that. But that's a different topic. We're looking at his solo work here. And a little bit of background, his first record came out in the early 90s, The Chronic, widely hailed as his greatest album. But I chose this one in particular because of, I think this is when the sonic aspect of his work it's just unbeatable. It was a interesting period where tape was converting to digital, so a lot of this was recorded to tape and then polished in the digital realm. This is the turn of the century. 1999 is when it was released, like I said. So you have to understand this kind of context of when this record came out, and it's still hailed today as a mastering reference. So if you're looking for something to reference when you're mastering your projects, I would highly recommend this record. It still stands up to the test of time. Um, all that said, and you also, I should mention that there's available a book, Three Kings. It touches on Dr. Dre and a couple other giants in hip hop that we do have available at the library that you can borrow a physical copy just to get some more background information on Dr. Dre and his career and sort of being a self-made man and knocking down a lot of doors in the music industry. So anyway, I could go on about his career, but I want to talk about some of the things that make this record really great. And part of it is being that Dr. Dre had this vision, okay? Like everything starts with a vision if you go back to my videos on pre production, right? The vision is part of this pre-production stage where you're coming up with a concept or you're thinking about what you want your project to be. And this doesn't have to just be this doesn't have to be a whole album. This could be just a single or an EP, whatever you wish. This album 2001 actually on vinyl ends up being a double album. So that's quite a large undertaking. Um, what makes this record so special to me, outside of the sonic and the objective great sound of it, is that it's cinematic. So you're starting with this Warner Brothers sample that he used to almost welcome you into this movie that you're about to listen to, rather than watching. You're watching it sort of with your mind's eye, but um, the whole the whole experience flows very well. So you're not going to have like a dark, brooding hip hop, underground hip hop sounding song backed by a candy bubblegum pop song. The whole album flows very well with its overtones. And part of what makes that so great is there's this sort of futuristic element to it with the instruments used. So you're not going to have, a bluegrass trio on one song as comprising the beat, and then the next song have some very spacey stuff. The whole album has this sort of spacey sound to it, but it's very much rooted in R&B and of course hip hop as well. But if you take a step before hip hop, looking at R&B, and there's definitely some funk elements in it as well. Dre worked with a team of musicians, live musicians. So this is a much different than his first album, which included a lot of samples and things of that nature. Where this album, instead of just sampling something, Dre would have, if there was a bass line he liked, he would have the bass player actually replay the bass part. And he can change the key, he can change the tempo, he can even change some notes here and there if he'd like to. And this is called interpolation. And interpolation is this idea of replaying something. And it's actually huge right now in pop music, where people are taking a line from a song that was written 30 years ago and putting it in their modern song. That's interpolation. It's not quite a cover of the song, but it's taking an element and it's putting it in there, and it's giving credit to the original writer. So it's a way of sampling without sampling the physical recording, but replaying it in some form or fashion, and it gives you the flexibility. Dre was a master of this. He knew what he wanted. He got the right musicians around him. So there's a very organic sound to this record as well. If you're a hip hop producer and you're wondering how this record and a lot of his stuff sounded very organic and live almost, it's because there are actual musicians playing these parts. Dre and the co-producer or assistant producer for the record, a guy by the name of Melman, who's from actually Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, they put together a lot of the drums using an MPC drum machine, and there's a lot of layering of different snares and snare samples and bass drum samples and things of that nature. So the drums are very much rooted in this idea of, hip hop from the 80s, where you're taking samples from records and kind of chopping them up. So the drums are definitely rooted in this old school hip hop idea, where the rest of the band, so to speak, a loose coalition of musicians, are coming in and playing the bass lines, the keyboards, the synthesizers. There's electric guitar on this record. So it gives this sort of organic feel to it as well. So as far as some of these musicians go, we should talk about how their careers were launched from this record. Scott Storch, for instance, who's featured prominently on keyboards on the very first single, Still Dre, had played keyboards with the Roots and then started working with Dre, and this album helped launch his career as a producer himself, where he won Producer of the Year in the mid-2000s and was just produced a ton of hits. I mean, his legacy was in the mid-2000s is crazy how many great records he produced. Mike Elizondo played bass all over 2001, ended up becoming head A&R of the A&R department at Warner Records for a while, and he works with bands like 21 Pilots and many other, A-list industry heavy hitters. So what Dre did, not only in creating this great record, but he helped people's careers and helped form their careers. He created great producers, and he gave them writing or producer credits. That is a career maker right there. So the last thing I want to kind of talk about, what makes this record special technically, is the space. And I'm not talking about the spacey sounds, which there are plenty of them that tie together these various different songs, but the space that the music is allowed to breathe on this record. So there's not an overload of ideas drawing your attention every which way at the same time. There might be a little guitar lick and then a spacey sound over here. There's always some sort of little ear candy, but it's not all happening at the same time. And your central focus is going to be on the rapper or the singer or whomever is taking the lead on the song. And this idea of space is very important for producers, myself included. I had to learn this the hard way, where I would overload things in songs, and there'd just be too much to where the listener can't really target one thing at a time. So you always want to keep your focal point clear, and I think that Dr. Dre does an excellent job of this. As far as a couple other things I can touch on without going too long in this video, is his vocal chain, which I'm sure many people are interested on how he gets the sound of the vocals on the record, which are so clear and they just pop and they're even. You don't have to strain to really hear anything. Well, one thing is he's using a Sony C800 microphone, which is a tube condenser, large condenser microphone, and it's about a $10,000 microphone. So needless to say, we don't have that at the public library studio, but there are large diaphragm condensers that are very flat. And what I mean by flat is that they're not going to color the sound much. So what Dre is after is the pure sound of the voice not being colored by a microphone, and then he'll run it through a preamp. And I think back then he was using some Neve preamps, but any good preamp that can just give a little bit of saturation to the voice, and then a compressor, which actually they used sort of a high ratio. I read a 7-to-1 ratio on the compressor with a quick release, and this works well for hip-hop and rap vocals because the vocals are very transient. What I mean by that is there are short spikes in the waveform rather than a long, sort of mellow, drawn-out song or waveform like you would hear in someone singing, for instance, like long notes and such. It's rap is very consists of a lot of different syllables in a short amount of time that are very transient, almost like drums, for instance. So you can get away with compressing them in a different manner, a little bit more compression on that than you can with something that's more smooth and it's going to need some more time to basically resolve, like a long note being sung. That's one thing that it sounds like it's a simplistic approach, but it's really not. It's understanding the different types of vocals or vocalists that you're going to use. And also, the tape saturation cannot be talked about enough. I think that's something that we forget a lot in the digital age, and having access to a tape machine is no easy feat because they're expensive and they cost a lot to upkeep, and they're also hard to understand and understand to use and implement them into a system. We do have a tape machine at the studio that we can run things through, so you can get some tape saturation that way, or you can use a tape saturating plug-in, which we have plenty of those as well. And this saturation adds sort of a warm semi-distortion if you use it just right. You can't overuse it or it becomes evident. You just want a little bit of this on there to kind of bring out some of the harmonics in the vocals. And I think that they did this incredibly. The record sounds amazing. I encourage everybody to listen to it. Like I said, there is the censored version and there's also the instrumental version. So they all sound excellent. But I think that's pretty much it as far as an overview on this great record. I hope you enjoyed this. Next week I'll have something, or next time I'll have something from a different genre, and we'll look at it in sort of a different lens as well. All right. Thanks a lot. Take care.